"Please, don't hit me." The cry echoed through the dark harbor, flickering yellow lights casting eerie shadows. A female CEO was cornered against a metal shipping container, a large man's arm raised above her. Waves crashed loudly offshore. Wind whistled through the steel cranes, and not a soul dared to intervene. A calm voice spoke from behind them. "Try touching her and see what happens." The entire group turned around to see just one man in oil-stained work coveralls, hands calloused from labor, but eyes sharp as knives. They had no idea that this man's appearance would trigger a shocking secret, one that could change the fate of an entire corporation and her life forever. Daniel O'Connor was 37 years old, a single father and former Navy sailor who now worked as a forklift driver and dock worker at the harbor. His daughter Emily was 9 years old with golden blonde hair, who loved folding paper boats to float down the canal. She always wrote hope on each boat, saying, "Someday my boats will reach the real ocean." Daniel lived simply in a small apartment near the harbor, with only his late wife's wool shawl hanging by the door like a keeper of precious memories. Eliza Moore was 30 years old, CEO of a logistics corporation, born wealthy but seen as a puppet of her family dynasty. When she heard rumors of fraud in the harbor management, Eliza decided to investigate personally, despite warnings from others. That night, Eliza was cornered by a group of managers in a shipping container. One man raised his hand threateningly, trying to force her to sign documents transferring cargo rights. She trembled and cried out, "Please don't hit me." Daniel happened to be finishing his shift when he witnessed the scene. He stepped forward and said firmly, "Put your hands down. If you want to touch her, you'll have to go through me first." The tension was thick as the management group backed away, not daring to make a move when they saw Daniel's experienced military gaze. Eliza was stunned, unable to believe that a strange dock worker would dare to shield her. After the situation was diffused, Eliza thanked him. Daniel simply replied, "Everyone has the right to be safe." Walking home that night, Daniel's mind drifted to the fear he'd seen in the woman's eyes. It reminded him of Emily's nightmares after her mother died, that same helpless terror of being hurt by forces beyond your control. At home, he found Emily fast asleep, a new paper boat on her nightstand. This one was different. Instead of just hope, she'd written "Hope for Everyone" in her careful handwriting. Daniel smiled softly. Even at 9 years old, his daughter understood that hope wasn't meant to be hoarded. The next morning, Emily asked over breakfast, "Daddy, did something happen at work yesterday?" "You look like you helped someone." "What makes you think that?" "You have your hero face. It's different from your regular daddy face." Daniel marveled at his daughter's perception. "I just made sure someone stayed safe, sweetheart." "Good. That's what Mommy would have wanted you to do." The mention of his late wife always made Daniel's chest tight, but Emily was right. Sarah would have been proud that he'd stepped in to help a stranger. Meanwhile, across the city, Eliza sat in her sterile office overlooking the harbor. She'd been in countless difficult situations before: hostile board meetings, aggressive negotiations, corporate power plays. But last night had been different. She'd been genuinely afraid, not of losing money or position, but of physical harm. And in that moment of terror, a complete stranger had appeared like a guardian angel. No one had ever protected her before. Her family saw her as an asset to be managed. Her colleagues saw her as competition to be eliminated. Her supposed friends saw her as a networking opportunity. But this dock worker had asked for nothing in return. He'd simply seen someone in danger and acted. Eliza found herself staring out at the harbor, wondering about the man who'd saved her. What kind of person risked their own safety for a stranger? What kind of life produced that level of courage and integrity? A trace of authenticity. Daniel remembered Emily's words from that morning as she floated her paper boat. "Daddy, if you see someone drowning, you have to be their life preserver, okay?" For the first time in years, Eliza felt curious about someone for reasons that had nothing to do with business or strategy. She wanted to understand what made someone willing to stand between danger and a person they'd never met. That afternoon, she made a decision that would change everything. She would return to the harbor not as a CEO conducting an investigation, but as a woman seeking to thank the man who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most. The next day, Eliza found Daniel at the workers' break area. awkwardly trying to thank him again. Daniel was humble, just doing what anyone should do. Eliza was surprised, unaccustomed to talking with someone who didn't care about her status or position. A few days later, Eliza returned to the harbor during the day and saw Daniel working. Emily ran over to hug her father, handing him a small piece of paper. "Smile, Dad." Eliza sat nearby and listened to Emily talk about her dream of paper boats reaching the real ocean. Her heart softened at the child's innocence. In the warehouse, Eliza confided her troubles. The family board was forcing her to sign contracts covering up smuggling operations, threatening to strip her of her rights if she refused. Daniel listened quietly, then shared his own story about a failed mission that cost him fellow soldiers, which made him hate deception in transportation and logistics. The two sat in silence on a shipping container, looking out at the sea. An unspoken understanding grew between them. One evening, Eliza visited Daniel's apartment and noticed the wool shawl hanging by the door. Daniel explained, "It belonged to my wife. I keep it there so Emily believes her mother is still here with us." Eliza fell silent, remembering her own mother, a woman whose honor had been buried by the family after a scandal. She broke down crying. Daniel didn't offer empty words, just placed the wool shawl gently around her shoulders. In the following days, their friendship deepened in ways that surprised them both. Eliza found herself looking forward to their conversations more than any business meeting. She started bringing coffee to Daniel during his breaks, learning about his daily routine. Emily always brightened when she saw Eliza, immediately sharing her latest paper boat creations. "Why do you always write hope on them?" Eliza asked one afternoon. "Because hope floats," Emily explained seriously. "Even when everything else sinks, hope finds a way to stay on top." The child's wisdom hit Eliza like a revelation. She'd spent her entire adult life trying to control outcomes through power and money, but this 9-year-old understood something she'd missed. Sometimes you just had to trust that good things could happen. One evening, as they watched Emily's boats float down the canal, Daniel said quietly, "She reminds me of her mother. Sarah always believed in the impossible. Tell me about her." "She was a social worker, spent her days helping families stay together, fighting a system that seemed designed to tear them apart. She used to say that every child deserves someone who would fight for them. She sounds incredible." "She was, and she would have liked you." "How can you know that?" "Because you're fighting for what's right, even when it costs you everything." That's exactly the kind of person Sarah admired. Eliza felt tears she hadn't expected. "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time." Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. That night, Eliza sat in her luxury penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture and designer belongings, but feeling more isolated than ever. The simple warmth of Daniel's modest apartment had made her own space feel like a beautiful prison. She thought about Emily's paper boats carrying their message of hope downstream, and wondered when she'd stop believing in the possibility of good things happening without a strategic plan behind them. A week later, Emily shyly asked Eliza, "Do you want to help me make boats tomorrow? I could teach you how to write hope in fancy letters." "I'd love that, sweetheart." "Good, because I think you need some hope of your own." The next afternoon, sitting cross-legged on Daniel's small balcony, Eliza learned to fold paper boats while Emily critiqued her technique with the seriousness of a master craftsman. "Your corners are too loose," Emily observed. "The boat has to be strong enough to carry the hope without sinking." "How do you know so much about this?" "Daddy taught me. He says everything worth doing has to be built strong from the beginning." Eliza looked at Daniel, who was watching them with a soft expression. This man had built his entire life around protecting and nurturing his daughter's dreams, even while dealing with his own grief and challenges. "Eliza," Emily said, concentrating on her folding, "are you going to be part of our family now?" The question caught both adults off guard. Daniel started to redirect his daughter, but Eliza spoke first. "What makes you think I should be?" "Because you make Daddy smile different, and you listen to my boat stories like they're important. And when you're here, everything feels more complete." That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Eliza and Daniel sat on his small couch, the wool shawl draped across the back. "I need to tell you something," Eliza said quietly. "I've never felt safer with anyone than I do with you and Emily." I don't know what that means yet, but I wanted you to know. Daniel took her hand. It means you found a place where you can be yourself instead of who everyone expects you to be. Is that enough? Just being myself. Eliza, yourself is more than enough. It's everything. A trace of authenticity. Eliza wrote in her journal that night, "For the first time, someone protected me without needing power in return." Looking out at the harbor lights, she realized she was falling in love not just with Daniel, but with the possibility of a life built on trust rather than transactions, on love rather than leverage. The family board discovered Eliza's association with a harbor worker and flew into a rage, demanding she sign over project control to cover up the scandal. Eliza fought back, declaring, "I will investigate this properly. I won't sign anything that covers up the truth." That night, Eliza went to the harbor to verify a suspicious cargo shipment. She was ambushed by hired thugs who held a knife to her throat, demanding she sign the documents. She trembled, backing against a container, crying out, "Please, don't hit me." For the second time in her life, those words escaped her lips. Daniel heard the commotion and rushed over, taking down one attacker with a single punch and pulling Eliza away from the knife. A violent fight ensued. Daniel took several hits, blood streaming from his forehead, but he never stopped shielding Eliza. One thug lit a lighter, intending to burn a container full of contraband to destroy evidence. Daniel charged forward to stop him, flames erupting violently around them. He grabbed Eliza and dove out of the burning container as smoke filled the air, and police sirens wailed in the distance. Eliza held him tightly, whispering, "You just saved my life." The investigation revealed a shocking truth. Members of her own family board had hired the thugs to eliminate Eliza and seize absolute power. The twist: Eliza realized her family was willing to kill her for their own interests. Daniel said, "You have two choices, bow down or stand up. I won't choose for you, but if you stand, I'll be right here." The aftermath of the attack shook Eliza to her core. Sitting in the hospital while doctors treated Daniel's injuries, she stared at the evidence folder the police had given her. Her uncle's signature on payment receipts to the thugs. Her cousin's text messages coordinating the attack. Her own family, people who claimed to love her, had tried to have her murdered for refusing to participate in their corruption. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked, wincing as a nurse cleaned the cut on his forehead. "Like my entire life has been a lie." "Not your entire life, just the part where you believed they cared about you more than money. How do you move forward from something like this? How do you trust anyone again?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You start small. You trust one person who's proven they'll protect you instead of use you. Then you build from there. What if I choose wrong again? Then you learn from it and choose better next time. But Eliza, you can't let their betrayal steal your ability to love and be loved." 3 days later, Eliza held a press conference that sent shockwaves through the business world. She revealed the smuggling operation, the corruption in her family's company, and the attempt on her life. The media dubbed it the Harbor Era Scandal, but Eliza didn't care about headlines. For the first time in her life, she was telling the truth regardless of consequences. Her family's response was swift and vicious. They froze her assets, revoked her corporate access, and launched a public campaign claiming she was mentally unstable. But Eliza felt freer than she had in years. The night after the press conference, she sat with Daniel and Emily in their small living room, watching the news coverage of her story. "Are you scared?" Emily asked with the directness only children possess. "Terrified," Eliza admitted, "but also relieved. It's like I've been holding my breath for 30 years and finally learned how to exhale." "That's good," Emily said seriously. "Holding your breath too long makes your face turn purple." Daniel laughed, and the sound made Eliza's heart skip. Even in the middle of chaos and uncertainty, this small family had become her anchor. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. "Now I figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be who they wanted me to be." "Any ideas?" Eliza looked around the modest living room, at Emily's paper boats lined up on the windowsill, at the wool shawl that had become a symbol of comfort and protection. "I think I want to be someone who helps people instead of using them. Someone who protects the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Someone who builds hope instead of destroying it." "Those are good things to be," Emily said, crawling onto the couch beside Eliza. "And you can practice with us." That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Eliza and Daniel sat on his small balcony overlooking the harbor where everything had started. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel asked quietly. "Walking away from everything you've known?" "I'm sure about you," Eliza replied without hesitation. "I'm sure about Emily. I'm sure about the kind of person I want to become. Everything else we can figure out together. Even if it means starting over with nothing?" "Daniel, I've had everything money could buy, and I was miserable. These past few weeks with you and Emily have been the happiest of my life. If that's not everything, I don't know what is." He took her hand, and she marveled at how such simple contact could feel more valuable than all the jewelry she'd ever owned. "Then let's build something real," he said. "Something honest. Something that can't be bought or sold or stolen." Looking out at the harbor lights reflecting on the dark water, Eliza realized she was no longer afraid of the unknown. For the first time in her life, she was excited about tomorrow. Because tomorrow she would wake up as herself, not as an heiress or a CEO or a family asset, but as a woman choosing love over fear, truth over convenience, and hope over resignation. The paper boats Emily had made were still floating somewhere out there in the darkness, carrying their message of hope toward the open ocean. And Eliza finally understood what the little girl had known all along. Hope really could float, even when everything else was sinking, especially then. Eliza made the decision to go public with the truth to the media, regardless of her family's threats. Harbor workers saw their CEO eating with dock workers for the first time, actually listening to complaints about unfair operations. Daniel quietly helped her gather evidence, unconcerned about the danger to himself. Emily gradually bonded with Eliza, inviting her to fold paper boats with hope written on them, floating them out to sea during windy afternoons. Eliza opened the Hope Fleet Fund to help poor children learn logistics trades, the first time she used her own name instead of her family dynasty. The three of them planted sunflowers together in front of the small apartment. Sunlight poured down as their laughter rang out like a real family. One evening, Daniel said, "I don't love you because you're a CEO. I love you because you dare to live authentically." Eliza trembled. "If I'm not ready yet, can we wait? Just please don't abandon me." Starting over wasn't easy. Eliza had to learn skills she'd never needed before. Managing a budget, grocery shopping, doing her own laundry. But each small victory felt meaningful in a way her corporate achievements never had. The Hope Fleet Fund grew slowly but steadily. Eliza used her business knowledge to structure it efficiently, ensuring that donations reached the children who needed them most. "I want to help kids like the ones who work these docks," she explained to Daniel one evening as they reviewed applications. "Kids who are smart and hardworking, but don't have the same advantages I was born with." "You mean the advantages you walked away from?" "The money was never really mine anyway. It came with too many strings attached. This feels like actually earning something." Emily had become the unofficial mascot of the Hope Fleet Fund. She insisted on personally approving every paper boat that went out with donation receipts, making sure each one was folded properly and had hope written in her careful handwriting. "Why is this so important to you, sweetheart?" Eliza asked one afternoon. "Because hope has to be perfect," Emily explained seriously. "If it's not strong enough, it might sink before it gets where it needs to go." 3 months after leaving her family's corporation, Eliza received her first paycheck from the consulting work she'd taken on. The amount was less than she used to spend on a single business lunch, but holding that check felt more meaningful than any trust fund deposit ever had. "Your first grown-up money," Emily announced proudly, helping her frame it. "What should we do to celebrate?" "Paper boat party." So they spent the evening folding dozens of boats, each one carrying a wish or a dream written in colored pencil. As they floated them down the canal, Eliza realized she'd never been happier. "This is the best celebration I've ever had," she said softly. "Better than fancy parties?" Emily asked. "So much better, because this is real." The harbor workers had gradually accepted Eliza as one of their own. She no longer wore designer suits to the docks, opting instead for practical clothes that could get dirty. She learned to operate a forklift, understand shipping manifests, and spot safety violations. "You're different than we expected," one of the older workers told her during a coffee break. "Most bosses don't want to get their hands dirty." "I'm not most bosses," Eliza replied, "and I'm not trying to be a boss anymore. I'm trying to be useful." One evening, while Emily was at a friend's house, Eliza and Daniel sat on the harbor pier, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked quietly. "The power, the luxury, the recognition." Eliza thought about the question seriously. "I miss feeling secure about money sometimes. I miss the convenience of having people handle all the details of life. But I don't miss feeling empty. I don't miss being surrounded by people who only cared about what I could do for them. I don't miss lying awake at night, wondering if anyone would love me if I wasn't wealthy." "And now you know?" Eliza smiled, leaning into his warmth. "Now I know. Because you and Emily loved me when I was just a stranger being threatened in a container. You loved me before you knew about my family or my money. That stranger was pretty remarkable. She just needed a chance to show it." 6 months later, the Hope Fleet Fund had helped 87 young people get training in maritime trades. Eliza received thank you letters that she kept in a special box, reading them whenever she doubted her decision to leave her old life behind. One letter was from a teenage girl whose family couldn't afford trade school. With the scholarship money, she'd enrolled in a marine engineering program and was already showing exceptional promise. "Look at this," Eliza showed the letter to Emily. "Maria's going to design ships someday." "Just like my paper boats, but bigger," Emily exclaimed. "Exactly like that." That night, as Eliza tucked Emily into bed, the little girl said, "Eliza, I'm glad you chose us. I'm glad you chose me too, sweetheart. We'll always choose you. Even when things get scary or hard, that's what families do." Eliza kissed her goodnight, finally understanding what unconditional love actually meant. It wasn't about what you could provide or achieve. It was about showing up day after day for the people who mattered most. One morning, Emily ran in holding a new drawing. 3 people standing by the harbor, with the words underneath, "My family is growing." Eliza looked at the picture, and tears fell silently. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. She whispered, "If you two still need me, I'd like to stay." Daniel squeezed her hand and smiled. "Welcome home." Final scene. The small, bright kitchen, Emily sticking smiley face stickers on Eliza's coffee cup, while outside paper boats drifted with the waves and sunflowers lifted their faces to catch the ocean breeze. 1 year later, Eliza's life looked completely different, but felt completely right. She lived in a modest apartment 3 blocks from Daniel and Emily, close enough to be part of their daily routine while maintaining her independence. Every morning, she woke to a text from Emily with a picture of that day's paper boat and a weather report for their evening harbor walk. Her consulting business had grown steadily. She helped small shipping companies improve their operations, finding deep satisfaction in work that actually solved problems, rather than just moving money around for the already wealthy. The Hope Fleet Fund had become a regional success story. They'd helped over 200 young people access maritime training, and several major shipping companies had begun donating equipment and internship opportunities. Most importantly, Eliza had learned what family actually meant. Every evening, she joined Daniel and Emily for dinner in their small kitchen, where the conversation was about homework and harbor news rather than stock prices and corporate strategies. The wool shawl still hung by the door, but now it felt like a blessing on their expanded family, rather than a memorial to loss. On Sundays, they had established a tradition of taking Emily's paper boats to different parts of the harbor, watching them float toward the open ocean while eating ice cream and making plans for the week ahead. "Eliza," Emily said one Sunday, examining her latest fleet of boats, "do you think you'll marry Daddy?" The question came out of nowhere, as children's questions often did. Eliza glanced at Daniel, who was pretending to be very interested in a seagull. "Would you like that?" Eliza asked carefully. "Yes, because then we'd be a real family officially, not just in our hearts." "We're already a real family, sweetheart. Marriage is just paperwork. But paperwork makes it harder for bad people to separate us." The wisdom in that statement took Eliza's breath away. This 9-year-old understood security in a way that most adults never would. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Eliza and Daniel sat on his small balcony, watching their sunflowers sway in the gentle harbor breeze. "She's not wrong, you know," Daniel said quietly, "about the paperwork making it harder for people to separate us." "Is that a proposal?" Eliza teased. "Maybe it is. Would that scare you?" Eliza considered the question seriously. A year ago, the idea of marriage would have terrified her, too much like the arranged unions her family had tried to force on her. But this felt different. This felt like choosing rather than being chosen for. It would have scared me before, she said honestly. But now I think I'd like the paperwork. I'd like the official proof that I belong somewhere. 6 months later, they had the smallest wedding possible. Just the three of them, a harbor chaplain and 2 witnesses from the dock workers' union. Emily served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her duties very seriously. Eliza wore a simple white dress and carried sunflowers from their garden. Daniel wore his best shirt and the same calm expression that had first made her feel safe. But the most beautiful moment was when Emily insisted on adding her own vows. I promise to keep making paper boats for all of us and to always save room in my heart for my whole family. As they walked home as an official family, Eliza realized she'd never been happier. She'd traded billions of dollars for a small apartment, designer gowns for work clothes, and a life of luxury for a life of love. It was the best trade she'd ever made. Final message. Family isn't where you're born, but where you choose each other, every day with real hearts. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.